Good morning, everyone. Today we're joined by Professor Amy Uelmen, lecturer in religion and professional life and special advisor to the Dean at Georgetown University Law Center. Professor Uelmen also serves as a senior research fellow at our Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. So Amy, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to be a part of our weekday conversations. Your teaching and scholarship is focused on faith, religion, and Catholic social thought in the context of legal practice and legal education. So to begin, I'd like to start by asking you about what brought you to these areas of focus?
I realize it can be a little unusual, right? But I think even growing up as a little kid, I was really fascinated by how a life of faith, of love of God and love of neighbor put into practice can transform even the most ordinary things. And as you know, I'm a triple Hoya. So also my time at the college majoring in American studies and with an emphasis in theology and literature was an opportunity to enrich that. But as I delved into the legal profession, I realized how difficult it can be to mesh the realms of faith and professional life, especially when somebody's navigating the pressures and expectations and conflicts, and even temptations to greed or to power in the profession. So, but I sensed within myself and within others that I knew a kind of a real sincere hunger for exploring these connections. And so I felt really encouraged when I was able to come together with others and create a kind of oasis of community and reflection. So then when I moved into an academic setting, I realized that that would also be an opportunity to create these deeper kinds of spaces for reflection for students and with faculty and with others who were interested in the themes. So that's how I got into it a little bit.
Got it. Now your courses provide opportunities for students to engage with one another around questions of justice and thinking about the practice of law through moral and theological perspectives. In your courses, particular attention is given to dialogue shaped by understanding across differences of thought and opinion. Are there any insights you could share with us on promoting these sorts of discussions in an academic context?
This is a huge challenge now. And so I have no illusions that this is easy. But I think many aspects of the law school curriculum, at least, focus on honing your analytical skills in order to get your own point across. And it's a very important skill, especially at the service of clients and in an adversarial system. I worked as a litigator for a time. It's an important skill. But I think having been immersed in this training and culture, I realize that sometimes as I'm listening to someone, even outside of a professional context, it's like I'm collecting little bullets in my head to shoot back when there's a space in the conversation. Sometimes I've compared this with my students to the sound effect in Star Wars, like pew, 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 you know? So kind of listening to refute or listening to debate. And so for these classes, I think excellent lawyers need to cultivate another set of skills that I would frame as listening to understand. And so, especially when we're discussing polarizing questions, it's not always realistic to assume that you can get to kind of an emotional empathy. But I think we can work on cognitive empathy. So this idea of understanding what brought the other person or side to their position, what's their story, what are their stakes. So I may not change my own mind, but by listening to understand, I think we can help to humanize the conversation and also delve into other layers of complexity. So for example, this week in my seminar that I teach with Michael Kessler called Religion, Morality, and Contested Claims for Justice, we opened a discussion on religious services and public health in the pandemic with around in the small groups with the question, what is at stake for you in this conversation? And the students then reflected how that made a difference to start the class exercise with that. Another technique would be also asking the students to write and to reflect before coming into the conversation. So they're not just simply reacting to what's going on in the room, or concerned about everything else, and they have a chance to own their own thinking. Mm-hmm. And that also tends to deepen the conversations about contested claims and politically polarizing questions as well. So sure. Just a couple thoughts.
Well, I'd like to take it a little further. You recently authored an essay for the Canopy Forum, a digital publication of Emory University, and the benefits of these approaches for our national discourse following the events at the US Capitol on January 6th. Can you share a few words on some of the ideas you offered in that essay?
Yeah, I think that day was so hard, and many of us maybe even just remember what we were thinking and feeling as watching that unfold. And I think for me, one of the sad realizations that came to a head, I think, in that moment was also recognizing how religion may have intensified some of these dangerous divisions in our culture. And so I think so many of our conversations have a kind of ships in the night quality, where because of the lack of trust, we're worried that even by listening to somebody else, we might be giving oxygen to a claim that with which we deeply disagree. So I have a couple suggestions in that piece, and one would be, especially in a university environment, I would say in this conversation, to recognize that there may be differing ways and differing paths to address injustice and heal the world. So on one hand, we need spaces of protest. And I think, very clearly to the Black Lives Matter protests that we had last summer. But I think we also need other forms of communication, ways to reach people that are suited to teaching and ministry and walking with people as they grow and as they think about changing their minds, and that education as this sense of kind of walking with people as they come out of a perspective into a wider horizon. Then the other suggestion is, I think a lot of people are feeling really overwhelmed by even finding anybody to talk with about deep differences. And so the suggestion in that piece is to try to build a relationship with just one person. So kind of like a buddy system, and maybe not on the extreme opposite end of a perspective that I have, but just one other person who can help me hear how I sound in the ears of somebody who might think differently than I do. So to have a kind of support sounding board to work through what are the ways in which we can get beyond our own echo chambers in order to enrich the national conversation. And many countries are struggling with this, not just the US, but sure. But to heal our world in that way.
Thank you. Now, last year you co-authored a paper, Business, Faith, and the Economy of Communion, which explored the dynamics of how we interpret the economic and social vision and ideas offered by Pope Francis and the Economy of Communion project. Can you expand on some of your insights from this paper and tell us a little bit about your involvement with the Economy of Communion project?
So this is one of my total passions in life. And in fact, I was just reading a document by Paul VI, Ecclesiam Suum, where he suggests that cultivating a zeal for the spirit of poverty is an excellent condition for dialogue. I hadn't noticed that before. And I'm also really fascinated by how Dr. King's vision for racial justice and interreligious cooperation are deeply tied to the work for economic justice. So the Economy of Communion, for me, has been a kind of vehicle to explore some of the creative community work in this direction. It began in Brazil in 1991 as an initiative of the Focolare movement, one of the ecclesial movements in the church. And I think the aims are two. One is like the goals of the movement as a whole, the work for the realization of the prayer of Jesus that all may be one. So also unity includes deep work for economic justice and integrity in economic relationships. And then really the dream of a life of community where no one is in need. So what does it mean to get goods in motion also in a community life because of the concrete attention that we pay to each other. So the businesses within the project commit themselves to sharing profits with those in material need and also providing opportunities for meaningful work. And then they consult with each other in their efforts to manage their companies with moral integrity. So I've helped a little bit as a legal consultant of the project as a whole. And some of the work has also fed into the recent Economy of Francesco projects and discussions under the leadership of Pope Francis. But personally, actually, this caught my imagination when I was a law student at Georgetown in 1991. And I realized how these principles contained a kind of paradigmatic shift for how I was thinking not only about economic relationships, but also legal relationships. And so I found just tremendous nourishment, also walking with grassroots folks and our annual gathering and other periodic gatherings to reflect on this and encourage each other. And that is in turn also wonderful food for thought for scholarship. So it's been a great, great project to be involved in.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. We're marking the 150th anniversary of our Law Center. Can you talk about the commitment to justice that you see at the Law Center and how you see our mission as a Catholic and Jesuit institution shaping the work of our Law Center?
So it's a fantastic opportunity to really deepen our commitment to justice, and our commitment to our mission. And so what I find most exciting, also under Bill Trainor's leadership, is the way that we're able to leverage the deep and varied resources of the Law Center and the Law Center together with the rest of the university. So I think people know it's one of the biggest law schools in the country. And so that has huge advantages also for tapping into rich expertise in the faculty. So I take one value, which is the dignity of the human person, and all of the ways in which that dignity is threatened by racism and environmental degradation, domestic violence, injustice in healthcare, the unfairness of the criminal justice system in so many ways, and policing. And so our programs and our centers, actually kind of one for each of those practically and more, help students to really train their eyes to that dignity. And then I'd also add with my soft spot for the student experience, the other program I'd highlight is the RISE initiative, which serves law students from backgrounds that are historically underrepresented in law school and in the legal profession. And so for me, the secret sauce of that program is the space that it gives to form community with other students and with faculty and staff. And so not only before the classes begin as part of an orientation, but throughout their journey. And I think you can ask most any law student, the hunger for a sense of community and connection is really at the core of their existence, also during the pandemic, but not only. And so for me, that taps into the deepest resources of our Catholic mission, getting us primed to be at the service of building that kind of community.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for taking this time and for all that you do for our community. In closing, is there a message that you'd like to share with our community?
I think my message is just one of gratitude. I know there's just numerous examples of heroism, of sacrifice for all that you and so many in our community are doing to kind of keep us together. to keep us building a sense of community as we travel through this time, and also sharing that hope with alumni and students and so many others. So I think the only message would be just to say thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'm deeply grateful, Amy, for you taking the time to be with us today. It's wonderful to engage with you and hear you describe your great work in our community. And I look forward to being with all of you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.